Hi there. If you've got to this video, it means that you have successfully made it to chapter 5, so good for you. I want to just explain processing your positives in a way that might be a little bit easier for you. It is a chapter sometimes people struggle with a bit, even though it's actually pretty easy. I just want to explain it in the way that we know best works. And it is just, let me just reiterate that this is very, very important, because if you think back to your psychological foundations triangle, your space, your social anxiety or social confidence, and self-esteem, this is one of your foundations of your mental health. And this is going to boost that self-esteem really well for the next 2 weeks. I want you to do this activity for the next 2 weeks really, really well, very thorough. And then after the 2 weeks, I'm going to explain what you're going to do. So for the first 2 weeks, if you go to page 73 and 74, you're going to see a chart there, and there's some examples put in there. It's very important to find the words to express yourself and to do this. This is very difficult if you have emetophobia or lower self-esteem in general. You might need to write something down and then step away and then come back to it. But oftentimes emetophobes are not actually used to looking at or processing their achievements or the wonderful things that have been happening to them in their life, which is why they have low self-esteem. If you think back to the end of chapter 4, it says on page 60, it explains when you've been seeing yourself through the dark tinted spectacles, you tend to not even notice or process positive things about yourself or the things that you have achieved. You do, in fact, have many experiences evidencing the fact that you are a worthwhile, competent person. But until now, you've probably dismissed, explained away, or not even noticed them. So oftentimes, emetophobes will attribute externally their wins and their achievements and things like that. So if somebody says, oh, you're looking good today, you might say something like, well, they just had to say that because they're my dentist and they're trying to make money. You might say, so one of the examples is that if you got your driver's license and you worked really hard and you studied and everything, you might do an external attribution saying, well, the trainer was just having an off day, or I had good luck that day. In other words, it wasn't because of anything I actually did. This goes back to chapter 3, internal versus external processing. So processing your positives is actually a way to learn to process things internally. So we're looking at it, we're putting it into our cognition, we're actually putting it into our memory bank by doing this, instead of just brushing it off, dismissing it, not even looking at it, like Peter in chapter 1, when he couldn't even see all the wonderful things outside. He only saw the dark gray clouds and the bad weather, and made himself feel bad about that. So what we're doing is we're doing the opposite. We're looking for the positives. We're looking for our achievements. We're trying to detect them and be more aware of them and then process them. That's very important. So it is really important that you now make sure that you do process your achievements. Realize that on achieving a challenge or aim, you have done something significant and you are allowed to reward yourself and give yourself praise for success. If you do not attain a particular desired performance outcome, you want to focus on what you have learned. So what you've learned and the effort that you've put in, and process those. It's not about perfectionism. It's not about getting an A+. It's about the effort that you put into whatever it was. You may not get the job offer because 100 people applied and you did a great job, but maybe they didn't pick you for some reason. We don't know what that is. All we can do is celebrate the effort that we put in. This is going to build your self-esteem. It's not about how well you perform, but instead you want to be focused on the effort and skills that you gain. So every day, when you're managing your thinking, processing your positives is actually relatively easy and shouldn't take you too long, maybe 10 minutes. So in the morning when you wake up and you're thinking about setting the intentions for the day, positively priming yourself, thinking about your ABC video, you're going to also start with 2 positives when you wake up and process those. And then every couple hours, maybe every 2 hours, and you want to put an alarm on your phone if you'd like to do that, especially if you're very busy, but please try to stick to this. Every couple hours, you want to write 2 more. And then every time you read them, so say I have 4 now, I'm going to also read the first 2 that I wrote down. And when I have 6, I'm going to read the first 2, 4, and 6, and then so on and so forth. So each time you're reviewing the same things over and over, and you're going to feel better and better. By the end of the day, you should have at least 10 positives. Most people find that they can make more when they're really looking. When you're getting ready for bed at night, it is a really good time to process these all over again before you go to bed. And if you have some insomnia or issues with resting at night, it does help to prime yourself and to think about all these wonderful things that you achieved and you accomplished, maybe how you took care of yourself throughout the day, things like that. And if you have emetophobia, it's also good to prime yourself for rest, for a good night's rest. So you want to get perspective, use your imagination to imagine visualizing yourself getting a really good night's sleep as well, and just being calm and in control. Okay, so some examples of processing your positives will be, I passed my driving test. That's the positive experience. What made this a positive experience? Well, it was a big challenge to overcome my nerves. Passing takes a lot of effort, practice, and concentration. What would you say to somebody else who had this experience? Imagine you're talking to your child or somebody you love, a loved one. Congratulations, good job. That shows you can overcome many things that you find tricky. So they're celebrating the effort that they put in. It is so important to reward yourself because thus far, especially if you have emetophobia, you've probably been beating yourself up about things. Instead of praising yourself and giving yourself credit, you've likely been telling yourself why it's not good enough. And I should have done better. I should be further along. Okay, so we're combating that negative thinking and turning it around. And this is how we start the process of overcoming emetophobia. We're reversing what we've been doing for sometimes even decades. What does this show you? What have you learned from this? I can achieve things even if I don't find them easy. So you want to do your best to really dig deep and articulate and express why these things are so important. Say it out loud. You've been feeling like very muted all this time, but now is the time to really praise yourself. I had one client who decided to just do this for everything, and she was literally praising herself for everything. I mean, the smallest of things, like picking up a pen. And within a week, she was feeling amazing, just great. Also, one thing that we encounter as coaches is we find that our clients will not allow themselves to praise themselves for little things. But this is the key to overcoming things like emetophobia, because it's all about small baby steps, being a turtle, just incremental, safe steps that you can then process and build. This is how we build our coping skills. This exercise is all encompassing. It is about creating a sense of an internal locus, building your self-esteem, your social confidence, and slowly reversing the process of emetophobia. So after you've been doing these things for 2 weeks very thoroughly, please feel free to write in your own notebook if you want, however you want to do it. Make it fun. If you want to use your phone, that's fine. It's sometimes easier for people to just quickly look at their phone, especially at work. So after the 2 weeks, what you want to then do is just process things in a very simplistic way. So somebody might say, I took my child to school. I am such a great mom. I am doing so much. I am an amazing mom. Typing for a colleague. I am a great worker. I am helpful. I am a great colleague. I had a healthy dinner. I am a great mom. I am taking care of myself and my children. I am amazing. I drove a mile on the motorway. I can cope. I am brave. I can do this. I'm so proud of myself. You see how it's more of a short form? So after the 2 weeks, then you'll be doing this and continue to do this. We're building new habits, new ways of thinking. We're keeping your self-esteem high and stable while building your coping skills. And this is very important for the program because as we're going along, you're going to start to challenge yourself and challenge those thinking styles and all of the ways that you created emetophobia, which means we have to keep your self-esteem nice and high so that you have good self-efficacy and self-belief. It may seem hard to understand how these things relate to emetophobia, but they absolutely do. And the more internal you are, the less symptoms that you're going to have. I will also send you a list of these examples. If you're really stuck, it's probably because you're not giving yourself credit for the little things and you're expecting to solve things like world hunger or overcome your emetophobia or other mental health symptom right away. That's not realistic. We need to start celebrating all the small things in our life because they are what make up our lives. It's a series of small events. Now, where this comes into play for emetophobes and this extra step that you can do is to not only process things like when somebody says that your hair looks nice today or that you did the laundry, but things that are more emetophobia specific, okay? I'm going to teach you how to do that Now, when we think about emetophobia, we think about all the key components that have created emetophobia that we've been doing and maintaining. So what we need to do is slowly and carefully reverse those things and dismantle it. Not only can you process these wonderful things that are happening in your life and beautiful moments, but you can also process the work that you're doing. Just doing the program, especially with a coach, is going to be something that is absolutely praiseworthy. I mean, think about that. There are so many emetophobes in the world that don't ever take responsibility or believe that it's possible. The fact that you're even here is a huge win. So you can write that as your positive experience. You can write that you finished chapter 5. You can write anything down that has to do with overcoming emetophobia. But let me be more specific. When we think about these key components, we think about your Thrive Quotient report. We think about your coping skills, your desire for control, your space score in general, but we also think about the emetophobia specific scores. So if you go with me to your report on page 13, if you have the adult version, you'll see emetosocial, emetoanxiety, and on 12, emetoavoidance. These are going to be more specific to overcoming emetophobia. They're going to feel a little bit harder. So if you want to start challenging yourself a little bit more, what you can do is start with these questions. So just have a look at them and start really questioning the limiting belief behind them. So for example, emetosocial, number 1, I haven't told other people about my emetophobia. Well, if you really want to grow your social confidence, you can start to look at this limiting belief and challenge it. And then say to myself, what is the doing part of this? I can change this belief, but how do I evidence this to myself? So what would you do? You tell somebody about your emetophobia. It could be one person, you could come out on social media, however you want to do it. So the goal is to not create too much anxiety, just a little bit. I might tell my husband if I've never told him before and just sit down and talk to him about it. I may tell my best friend finally and have a heart-to-heart conversation. And you know what? How they react is on them. This is about you and you feeling strong and feeling good and then processing this. It doesn't even matter so much how they react, although most people are pretty understanding about it or have some questions. There's no shame in coming out as an emetophobe. This is understood to be a debilitating phobia that is not your fault. But what counts is that you're taking responsibility right now. So what you would do is you would say positive experience in your chart is I decided to tell my husband about my emetophobia after 10 years. What made this a positive experience? I challenged my social anxiety and it went actually better than I thought it would. He was a lot more understanding than I thought he would be. And we actually got closer because of it. And we had a really nice conversation. What would you say to somebody else who had this experience? So imagine you're talking to somebody else who's struggling with emetophobia who came out and was brave and said this to somebody. You would never belittle them or anything. You would say something like, amazing job. I know that's been hard for you. Good for you. I'm so proud of you. How did it go? Something like that. And then what does this show you? What have you learned from this? So you would say something like, I'm proud of myself for challenging my social anxiety. I'm overcoming my emetophobia. I'm in the Thrive program. I'm really proud of myself. This was something that was hard for me, but I can do hard things. So that's how we process and just really praise and reward yourself. All right, let's try another. I feel very anxious at the thought of being sick. So the positive experience might be detecting or catching one of these thoughts because this is what maintains your balloon of emetophobia belief. So if you have a thought that's like, I'm feeling really anxious at the thought of being sick right now, and you catch it and you're going to amend it, you put it in the positive experience box and you would say something like, I was feeling very anxious at the thought of being sick, but I challenged this limiting belief. Well, why is that positive? It's positive because I'm breaking the cycle of this negative thought pattern. And I know that this is not true. I can cope with being sick. I'm going to keep telling myself this and building my coping skills. There's no reason to be anxious at the thought of being sick. I know this logically, but I need to prove this to myself. So this is how I'm doing this. Of course, you would say to somebody else something like, well done. It's so awesome that you caught that thought. You're really on your way to overcoming. Well, what does this show you? What have you learned from this? I can catch my limiting beliefs. I'm learning new skills that are going to allow me to thrive and overcome emetophobia. And I'm reinforcing this belief that I can cope with being sick. Okay, let's talk about challenging desire for control. So it's very similar. You can actually process catching a desire for control thought, and you can process challenging that desire for control thought or action. So you have some kind of desire for control, like let's say it's around your children, where you normally go somewhere like McDonald's and there's a ball pit, and you would normally exhibit desire for control over the situation by saying, no, 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 we're not going to go in there, not today. Challenging your desire for control would look something like, well, you can go in for 5 minutes today. And when they get out, you might still want to wash their hands, and that might be okay, but you still challenged yourself a little bit. So not only did you catch that thought, but you also challenged that desire for control, that guard dog within you, and allowed yourself to relax and let your children play. So the positive experience would be, I caught this desire for control thought that was not helpful for overcoming emetophobia because it's reinforcing the belief that being sick would be the worst thing in the world and really scary. I also allowed my child to go into the ball pit for 5 minutes. What made this a positive experience? I've never been able to do something like this before. I'm so proud of myself. I'm a great mom because I allowed my child to do the thing that they were wanting to do, and it wasn't dangerous or hazardous. That was just my emetophobia. So I caught my inner voice, I caught my desire for control, and I tolerated it. So we're going to tolerate these unpleasant feelings. We're showing ourselves that we can cope and that everything's going to be okay. Because the more that we avoid something, the more that we create the phobia. So we're slowly stretching ourselves and then processing it well. Sometimes emetophobes will find themselves stretching themselves and challenging themselves. Oh, I can go on that trip. I really want to go on that trip. But then they're miserable because they're not celebrating their wins. So rewarding yourself is so, so, so important, and often the missing key component in the recovery of emetophobes. Of course, you would say to somebody else, amazing job. That was definitely hard for you to tolerate those uncomfortable feelings, but it's been a day. Everything's fine. The world didn't come to an end, and your children were relaxed and had a good time. Because often children will copy our desire for control. So that's such an interesting point, because we do not want to feel this irritability and this stress, right? We want to relax and be spontaneous and let them live their lives. What have you learned from this? I can overcome unpleasant feelings and tolerate them. I am strong. I am learning coping skills. And every step that I take is a positive step toward overcoming emetophobia. Okay, let's talk about inner voice. Our inner voice is very, very important when trying to overcome emetophobia, because it is that self-talk. It is that conversation we have with ourselves all day long. And if it's negative or berating or what if, or telling us we can't do something, or just all about emetophobia limitations, then we're not going to be able to stretch ourselves. So we have to catch these thoughts. Our inner voice often has our unhelpful thinking styles inside of it, and you can start to detect them. So first of all, I want to challenge you to look at your Thrive Quotient report and look at your highest scores on your unhelpful thinking, which is on page 7. Page 7 of your report are the 9 most common thinking styles that emetophobes typically use to their detriment. So for example, our inner voice says something like this. Somebody says, hey, I have a birthday party in 2 weeks. I would love you to come. If your inner voice comes back at you and says something like, oh, you would like to go, but what if somebody there was sick? You know, the winter season, what if? Maybe you should just stay at home, okay? Learn to identify your thinking styles. So go to your page and say, which ones are the most problematic for me? Well, an emetophobe typically has a lot of brooding, perfectionist thinking, black and white, catastrophic, and negative, sometimes hypervigilant and helpless. Often there's not so much impulsivity or paranoia, but that can be a thing. So what you want to do is go to chapter 8 and just have a skim of the ones that are the most problematic for you, so you can familiarize yourself with them, recognize them in yourself. Definitely with perfectionist thinking. So let's say black and white thinking. So back to the ball pit example, we might say the positive. So a person might be thinking about the ball pit for their children. Oh, my children want to go in this ball pit, mommy and dad. Mom, can I go? Or dad, can I go? the inner voice of an emetophobe is going to say, what? Oh my goodness, there's probably so many germs in there. That's too dangerous. No way. Or if they do go, I have to shower them and wash their hands and just be very obsessive. So black and white thinking would be, those pits are always disgusting and full of germs, right? So we want to challenge that. So the positive experience would be catching a black and white thought. So always, never, very all-encompassing thoughts, right? They're just making these huge claims over things. There's no room for gray in there. Like, it's very unlikely that my child's going to get sick from here. So why not? So tolerating the gray, you would say my positive experience was I caught the black and white thinking when I thought, oh, they'll always get sick from ball pit. And that's what you want to really think about. You want to really process something like that. What made this a positive experience? I caught my negative, perfectionist, black and white thinking about this thing, and I allowed my child to go in for 5 minutes. So you can build on them, you can isolate them. There's so many things that you can celebrate. You just need to learn how to find them. So a catastrophic thought, for example, would be, if I go on this trip with my children, one of them will be sick and it will be the worst thing in the world and disgusting and terrible, and I can't possibly be trapped in a hotel room with them. So catching a thought like that is very powerful. So not only catching it, but then challenging that behavior associated. So maybe it's a little bit too scary for you right now to go on a huge trip like Disney World with your family. But what you want to do is start exposing yourself to whatever that thing is that you've been avoiding. So maybe it's you go in the car with your child for 10 minutes, or maybe you plan a trip that's very close and then you process that trip. So you're catching it and then you're challenging it and then you're doing the opposite of that thing and then you're processing it. The processing part is key. Please talk out loud, be dramatic, praise yourself. That's how it's going to really sink in to your memory and into your self-esteem battery. Notice when you're being hypervigilant. Notice if you're being a little bit paranoid. And boy, it's really important to notice if you start brooding and ruminating over something, because when we brood and ruminate, we just create this cycle of unhelpful powerlessness for ourselves. We're not actually solving a problem. We're just thinking about it over and over and over. And we know from research that this creates a sense of powerlessness and depression, and we create a lot of anxiety and stress. So when we can tackle all these different thinking styles, either together or separately, we start teaching ourselves how to calm them down. But remember, the most important thing to overcoming and to calming down unhelpful thinking is to strengthen your space, your sense of power and control over your experiences. How do you do that? You grow your coping skills and self-belief. How do you do that? Well, you process your positives. You process all the things that you are doing in order to overcome emetophobia in a very powerful, self-gracious way. Really pay attention to your inner voice. Is it kind? Is it calm? Is it reassuring? Is it helpful? Is it like, hey, you didn't get that today, you created a little anxiety, but tomorrow's going to be better? Or I can try again in 5 minutes, or it's not a big deal, we're getting there, we're working on this, we're going to get there eventually. Remember, this is a process from Cambridge to London. As long as you stay on the right path, you will get there. So every person is absolutely different, and that is fine. It may take you weeks, it may take you months, it could take you a year to really solidify everything. But that's okay, because you're going to live your life anyway. And every time you do this, you're going to feel more powerful. But if you do this, you're going to excel much quicker.